Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon to Mayor Iverson, council members, Grand Chief Alexis, legislative colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly a pleasure to be here with you on Treaty 6 lands and among Edmonton's business and community leaders to update you on where our province is at and where it's going. And I very much appreciate the invitation from the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce to speak today, just as I appreciate the advice that the Chamber has provided to our government over the last few months. We welcome your expertise because we realize just how crucial it is. Alberta is dealing with serious challenges, and it's going to take all of us pulling together to steer this province in the right direction. As we've already talked about, these are difficult days for many Albertans. But I'm here today to tell you that they won't last forever. And I don't mean this only in the sense that growth will inevitably pick up. I mean that recovery will happen because we are putting the province on a better path by staying true to Albertans' deepest values. When times are tough, Albertans help those in need. Our government will do the same. We will maintain funding for core services so people don't slip through the cracks. And when times are tough, Albertans also take extra care with their finances. And we are going to do the same as well, as part of our plan to return to budget balance. We are prioritizing public dollars for the services families count on most: healthcare, education, and key social services. And at the same time, we're taking steps to limit overall spending increases to just over 2% each year. And I'd like to take just a brief moment to explain how we're doing that. To start with, outside of the 4 departments that provide core public services, health, education, human services, and advanced education, overall spending across all other ministries is $360 million lower than last year. And across government, a policy of hiring restraint has been implemented. And we are also doing something that no other previous government was willing or able to do, in that we are stabilizing healthcare spending in a cautious and predictable manner. In the last 10 years, the health budget has increased by an average of 6% each year. We've stabilized that budget this year. Next year, we will manage the health budget with a 4% increase, 3% the year after that, and thereafter, we aim to hold increases to 2% annually. This is how we control costs and return the budget to balance as the economy recovers. Finally, we are partnering with job creators, like the people in this room, to diversify the economy so it creates good jobs, stable growth, and lasting prosperity for all Albertans. This is what you can expect from us. Our government will support jobs, and we will support families, because that's the Alberta way. Now, last week, you had a chance to see how this works in our government's budget. As I said, we stabilized public services so that families have doctors and nurses, kids have teachers, and all Albertans have the public services that they need. And we are also building the infrastructure Alberta needs as it grows. And despite the tough economic situation our province is in right now, it does still continue to grow, with 187,000 new Albertans anticipated by 2018. So you'll see the results of these infrastructure investments in and around Edmonton as we go forward. For instance, We've set aside the $104 million to complete the interchange at QE2 and 41st Avenue. We've set aside $80 million for work on the busy Highway 19 corridor connecting Devon and Nisku. And we will complete the city's ring road in 2016, improving traffic flows throughout the capital region. We've allocated $264 million for post-secondary campus expansions in Edmonton. MacEwan University, NAIT, and Norquest College will all get funding to grow capacity, so that as the economy recovers and jobs are created, we will have skilled people to fill them. Now, the Royal Alec and the MIS will receive, in the next couple of years, $10 million each to plan future modernizations. And we will meet demand for classroom space in fast-growing Edmonton neighborhoods. We've allocated over $833 million for 36 new replacement and modernized schools in the city. But let me just say a word about these projects, because I know they're on a lot of people's minds. I know Albertans are not happy about the delay in construction, and frankly, neither am I. Families were led to believe that they could expect new or renovated schools in their neighborhoods on unrealistic timelines. Similarly, I personally can recall the previous government's announcements of funding for hospitals here in Edmonton. Like you, I know that our hospitals in our city need repairs, modernizations, and more. But upon taking office, our government learned that funding had been promised without any real plan in place. Certainly not the level of planning that multi-million-dollar investment requires. In both cases, money was committed, quite frankly, for the sake of a press release. And that, however, is not how my government will govern. I believe very strongly that capital investment, which is so fundamentally important to the path that we take forward, must be decided on the basis of carefully considered planning. And that is why we allocated the money to each of the Misericordia and the Royal Alec for planning. Previous governments played politics with things that are important to Albertans. I fundamentally reject that kind of politics. When public dollars are scarce, Albertans expect money to be supported by a careful value for money analysis of each proposed project. And it is on that basis that we will be committing to the $4.5 billion increase in capital spending announced in the budget. Capital projects will be justified by the evidence and then announced. It will not happen the other way around. Our government will be honest and realistic as we plan infrastructure, and methodical and transparent in how we build it. So that's just a few words on that issue. Now, this will also apply to the way we handle Alberta's finances. We are putting in place Canada's tightest borrowing limits. The Fiscal Planning and Transparency Act, introduced in the legislature last week, will restrict our government's borrowing to 15% of GDP, half the average of every other province in the country. This is how we will also balance the budget in stages by 2019 and 2020. Now, as I have said, we will do this by making compassionate but firm decisions to keep overall growth in government spending at an average of 2% annually. Now, I want to speak clearly. There are some who have called for immediate, massive, reckless cuts. But they aren't being transparent about what cuts of that magnitude would mean for families. And I can tell you right now that it would mean much more than laying off a handful of managers in healthcare. It would mean chaos in our health system, eliminating thousands of frontline healthcare positions. And it would mean thousands of new students entering the school system without the teachers they need to help them to succeed. And in my view, that is not the right way to deal with a fiscal shock of the nature that we are struggling with here in Alberta. Instead, we have a plan to stabilize the budget by protecting the healthcare and the education that families need, while prudently setting the province on a path to balance, because that is the Alberta way. Now, stable public services and prudent spending will see us through a difficult economic environment, but by themselves, they will not ensure a sustainable and continued return to prosperity. Without change, our tomorrows will look very much like our yesterdays, and the cycle of boom and bust will repeat, hurting families and communities. Which is why our government is focused on diversifying Alberta's economy, giving it a broader base, and making it more resilient. But this is not something that we can achieve alone. We know that government can't create jobs, growth, or prosperity. That is the work of entrepreneurs, visionaries, and job creators. What we can do is be good partners, creating the right conditions and opening the right doors, so that Alberta, which is a good place to start a new business, becomes a great place to turn an idea into a product, and a product into a prosperous enterprise. You know, I think often about success stories from the Silicon Valley. Some of the world's most famous companies got their starts in garages like Apple and Google. Amazing solutions can emerge from the most unexpected places. And it happened here in Alberta. We know that. For decades, most of Alberta's energy reserves were considered useless because the oil was mixed with sand and no one could figure out how to separate the two, until a young researcher named Dr. Carl Clark discovered the hot water separation method. Dr. Clark didn't conduct his experiments in a garage, but he did conduct them in his house, often involving the family washing machine. Eventually, Dr. Clark was able, with the help of the Alberta Research Council at the time, to perfect his invention. It was and remains the foundation of the modern oil sands industry, and it transformed Alberta. And it's a powerful example of what can happen when creative minds come together in an environment that supports innovation and gives great room for ideas to grow. That's the province Alberta once was, and that's what we need to become again. We have incredible advantages: outstanding universities, strong manufacturing base, and a smart, young, and diverse population. We need to use these advantages to meet the challenge of diversifying our economy within and beyond the energy sector, so that we can put the days of boom and bust behind us forever. That's why one of the things we're doing is we're streamlining business and trade support initiatives in our government in the newly announced Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, and why its first task will be implementing an economic development and diversification plan for Alberta. Now, I'll be the first to admit that diversification has a checkered history in our province. In the past, it's sometimes meant government being in business, and it's why, for instance, we find ourselves in the golf course business in Kananaskis, for example. When government attempts to pick winners, it sometimes works out that Albertans end up the losers. But that's not what we're talking about here. What our government is doing is putting money into the hands of experts who know what to do with it, like ATB, like Alberta Enterprise Corporation, and like AIMCO. They will make independent decisions based on their expertise and their judgment, and each of these organizations has a strong track record of demonstrating both. We're increasing the resources available to ATB by $1.5 billion so it can offer loans on commercial terms to build Alberta. And we're providing greater access to venture capital for entrepreneurs and job creators so that they can get startups launched, become bankable, and finance growth and innovation. Our government will invest $50 million over the next 2 years into the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, supporting a venture capital market and entrepreneurship across our province. And finally, we're devoting a portion of Alberta's savings to invest in growth. The Alberta Investment Management Corporation will set aside 3% of the Heritage Fund, $540 million, towards companies encouraging growth in our province. Altogether, we are mobilizing almost $2.1 billion to support job creation and diversification to make Alberta the best place in Canada to launch and grow a business. We will be partners on access to capital and also on job creation. For example, as I announced a couple of days ago, we are restoring the STEP program. Now, the STEP program is a proven resource that helps employers hire students and gives them the value real-world experience that they need to apply their skills and education effectively in the workforce. I, myself, am actually a product of the STEP program and can potentially attest to its effectiveness. Granted, there are better jobs than becoming the premier, but there are worse ones too. Moreover, as we introduce this or reintroduce this project, the STEP program, we are going to be making it available to small businesses, which is new, so that they too can benefit from the enthusiasm of having Alberta students in their workplaces during the summer. Finally, acting on the advice of former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge, we will take advantage of low labor and construction costs during the downturn to accelerate the province's capital construction program. As I mentioned earlier, that means well-planned investments in the infrastructure to address many of Alberta's needs and many of Edmonton's needs. Those of us who have lived in Alberta for a long time know how it's been in the past. During economic downturns, government stopped spending on infrastructure, leaving a massive infrastructure debt that hurt Albertans, hurt their communities, and actually impeded investment and business growth. Then, when good times returned, governments struggled to catch up and wound up competing with the private sector, driving up the cost of materials and labor and overheating the economy, which again hurt Albertans and their communities and often impeded the very investment we were trying to attract. It's the worst way to build infrastructure. Our government will increase investment in capital spending by 15% compared to the previous plan, an additional $4.5 billion in new investment over 5 years. Over the next 3 years, the supplementary capital spending will increase employment by 8,000 to 10,000 jobs and real GDP by 0.5%. In my view, this is part of government's role to act as a shock absorber during difficult economic times. And it will ensure that we don't fall behind again when growth returns. Friends, what Albertans have told us is that oil prices shouldn't dictate whether we're flush or struggling. They've told us that leadership and vision are necessary to build a more resilient economy that doesn't ebb and flow with the actions of other major oil producers in the world. That's what our government is working on. We are aiming for a new direction for the economy, from one primary source of growth to many. Achieving this involves changing both minds and policies. There are great ideas brewing in our province, and with capital and the right supports, they can come to a boil. Alberta is a place where research and creativity and ingenuity once came together to create an industry that employs tens of thousands of people and attracts billions of dollars of investment. And that's the kind of Alberta that we need to build once more. A place where smart people work together to build up a critical mass of innovation beyond what exists today. We're government partners together with visionaries and ideas people to turn concepts into reality. Where Alberta becomes Canada's best place to launch and to grow a business. And entrepreneurs have confidence that they can take their ideas from conception, design, to commercialization, knowing that supports and funding are there. We need to encourage more Albertans to follow the example set by the Chamber of Commerce members itself, to take risks, and to become entrepreneurs. You know, ladies and gentlemen, it is a good thing that change is good because we are in a period of major change. In Ottawa, there is a new government, and on many issues, that government is in alignment with our government. There is a mutual recognition, for instance, that our governments need to do an even better job of taking care of the environment, in particular on climate change. And we have a like-minded partner in New Brunswick, in Premier Gallant, whose province is the terminus of the proposed Energy East line. All of us know that getting it right on climate change will be a necessary precondition to getting the energy infrastructure that we need built to access new markets and to secure our future prosperity in this province. Some people believe in an old way of doing things, they believe that, strangely, cutting the health budget will somehow lead to higher oil prices. And let me just say, that won't happen, nor will it in any way contribute to the innovation and the diversification that we need to grow in this province. It is time for a new approach to government, one that supports families and that supports jobs. We must stabilize our public services, we must be prudent with our finances, and we must diversify the economy to create the conditions for change, led by our best and our brightest, our entrepreneurs and our risk takers, people like you. That was the Alberta way, and that is the way it will be again. And I thank all of you very much for coming out to listen to me speak today. Thank you.